Pipelines are the arteries of Canada's energy economy, moving oil and natural gas from Alberta's oil sands to markets across the country and beyond. For Alberta, these pipelines mean jobs, billions in revenue, and funding for public services. Without them, transporting oil becomes costly and risky, relying on trains or trucks. But pipelines are also at the center of a fierce national debate: economics versus environment. Many in British Columbia fear spills that could devastate land and marine ecosystems. The Pacific Gateway Pipeline, proposed to carry Alberta's bitumen to a port near Kitimat, reignited this conflict. Alberta saw opportunity: new markets, better prices, economic growth. British Columbia saw unacceptable risk to its coast and way of life. Years of negotiation, promises of safety, and billions in potential benefits couldn't bridge the divide. The pipeline became a symbol of two competing visions: resource-driven prosperity versus environmental stewardship. When British Columbia rejected the project, Alberta's reaction was swift and fierce. The divide over pipelines has become a chasm, with no easy solution in sight. This isn't just a policy dispute, it's a battle over Canada's future. The consequences of this standoff will shape the country for years. The story of the Pacific Gateway Pipeline is a story of a nation at a crossroads. On October 14, 2025, British Columbia's government stunned the nation by rejecting the Pacific Gateway Pipeline. The project, conditionally approved by federal regulators, needed British Columbia's final sign-off, but Premier Isha Sharma said no. The decision ended years of negotiations and dashed Alberta's hopes for a new energy corridor. Industry leaders warned this would scare off investment, while environmentalists and many First Nations celebrated a hard-fought victory. For supporters, it felt like betrayal after years of regulatory hurdles and concessions. For opponents, it was about protecting the coast and a way of life. The announcement sent shockwaves through Canada's business community and deepened the national divide. British Columbia's stand was clear: some places are too precious to risk for oil profits. The battle over Canada's energy future had entered a new, more hostile phase. British Columbia's rejection centered on the risk of catastrophic oil spills, especially along its rugged, stormy northern coast. The pipeline route crossed critical salmon habitats and unceded First Nations lands, many of whom withheld consent. The government argued that no technology could guarantee a safe cleanup in such challenging environments. Climate change commitments also played a role. Approving the pipeline would undermine British Columbia's emissions targets. Public opinion was firmly against the project, especially in coastal communities. For Premier Sharma, the decision was about aligning with a clean energy future and respecting Indigenous rights. Political survival and environmental principle went hand in hand. The message: British Columbia would not risk its natural heritage for short-term gain. Alberta's response was immediate and dramatic. Premier Michelle Donnelly invoked the Ironclad Sovereignty Act, threatening to restrict fuel shipments to British Columbia. She accused British Columbia of economic sabotage and vowed to defend Alberta's interests. The move was designed to inflict economic pain. British Columbia relies on Alberta for gasoline and diesel. Fuel shortages and price spikes loomed for the Lower Mainland. Legal experts predicted a constitutional showdown over provincial powers and interprovincial trade. For Alberta, this was about survival and justice. For British Columbia, it was a new crisis. The standoff marked a dangerous escalation, with both provinces digging in. The federal government faced a direct challenge to its authority. The energy feud had become an all-out economic war. The pipeline conflict hit ordinary Canadians hard. In Alberta, workers lost jobs and hope. Families faced growing economic anxiety. In British Columbia, the threat of fuel shortages sparked panic. Families and businesses braced for higher costs and tough choices. The dispute strained relationships between provinces, fueling resentment and social media battles. Young people questioned their futures in a divided country. The fight over energy policy became personal, affecting livelihoods and dreams. The uncertainty threatened to drive talent and investment away from both provinces. The shadow of this conflict stretched across a generation. The Premier's words shaped the crisis. Premier Sharma defended her decision as protecting the coast and future generations, calling for a clean economy. Premier Donnelly accused British Columbia of hypocrisy and invoked Alberta's right to defend its interests. The federal government urged calm, but struggled to balance economic and environmental priorities. First Nations leaders celebrated a victory for Indigenous rights. Business leaders warned of damage to Canada's investment reputation. The debate exposed deep fractures in Canadian society, between provinces, industries, and visions for the future. The rhetoric grew sharper, making compromise seem impossible. The nation watched as leaders dug in, each claiming to defend the true Canadian interest. The crisis had become a defining test of leadership. The future is uncertain. Legal battles and economic pain are inevitable. British Columbia and the federal government will challenge Alberta's actions in court, setting up a landmark constitutional fight. Meanwhile, real people face fuel shortages, job losses, and economic instability. The conflict forces Canada to confront tough questions. Can it balance climate goals with resource development? Can provinces find common ground? The risk deeper divisions, economic decline, and a fractured confederation. Or, this crisis could spark a new consensus, supporting workers, respecting Indigenous rights, and investing in clean energy. The path Canada chooses now will define its future. The pipeline showdown is more than a dispute. It's a turning point for the nation.